Okay, so I know that this is a bit of a controversial topic, but I really love indie games. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of bad indie games out there, but at the same time, some of my favorite games of all time are indie games. A lot of games that have revolutionized gaming are or were indie games. Being an indie developer comes with a lot of risks. You have a low or sometimes no budget. A lot of indie devs are weekend warriors or a small group of people throwing together something in their free time. So with that, sometimes indie games can take years to develop what a AAA dev could produce in a few months. And like I said, there are a lot of really bad indie games out there, but when they get it right, it is so good. You get to see a passion project from a person or small group of people really come to life. This video is heavily inspired by the next game I'm going to review for this channel, which should come out next week, Hollow Knight. The last platformer I can remember playing for more than 30 minutes was Pac-Man World on the PS1. I don't have many comments on that game because I was like 8 when I played it, but the point is I don't really play platformers. I generally find the challenges from level to level to be just frustrating and not really gratifying. Like when it comes to difficulty for games, there are frustrating mechanics that are difficult for the sake of being difficult, and then there are challenging mechanics that require the user to think outside of the box and strategize. The majority of platforming mechanics always felt like the former to me. They always just felt frustrating and not really gratifying to beat. However, Hollow Knight is one of those games where, like I said earlier, you're seeing a passion project come to fruition. I'll be doing a full review next week, as I said, so subscribe for that if you're interested. But this game is so beautiful and interesting. Some of the mechanics I still found frustrating as somebody who doesn't really play a lot of platformers, but the world was so interesting, I constantly wanted to discover and find more. I never thought that I could find a 2D world so interesting. Hollow Knight did what I thought no game could do, get me to finish a 2D platformer. The poster child of indie games being amazing is Stardew Valley. I thoroughly enjoyed this game, admittedly not as much as other people, but I did enjoy it. It's a Harvest Moon inspired farming sim game on the surface, but it's so much deeper than that. My current favorite game, Factorio, is an indie game. It's hands down the best management and automation game that I've ever played, and it's made by a small dev in Prague. Again, don't get me wrong, indie games go wrong all the time, especially during the crowdfunding hype in the mid-2010s. But again, typically these are passion projects, and when they do go wrong, sometimes there's redemption. Look at No Man's Sky, one of the worst game launches ever, and since, Hello Games has totally redeemed themselves and has released over a dozen massive free updates to the game and is beloved by fans. And I can't wait to try this game again. Now, this doesn't excuse the terrible launch and undelivered promises from 2017, but it's amazing to see a team do the right thing and redeem themselves on a project, which brings me to perhaps the real reason I really love indie games so much. AAA devs suck and they're getting worse. Per the last example, when was the last time a AAA launch went bad, and recently there are a ton of them, and the company fixed the issue and redeemed themselves later on? I couldn't come up with an example, so if you have one, drop one in the comments and, make it somewhat recent in the last 10 years. I mean, some of the best AAA games and series were once indie games. Minecraft, Civilization. I mean, look at the old Nintendo before it turned into the money-hungry dumpster fire it is today. AAA companies used to put real love into their games, but many have fallen victim to the corporate greed. EA is the prime example, but to avoid beating a dead horse, I'll just mention Battle 2042 one more time and move on. Look at the launches of the recent Halo games. Halo is one of the most iconic franchises of all time and has revolutionized the FPS genre. Now we have Halo Infinite, which looks like it has some redeeming qualities, but still hasn't released core features of the game like Forge 6 months after the initial game's release. The campaign, which in my opinion is a major staple of any FPS game, wasn't released until a month after the release, and it still doesn't have co-op support. Okay, so I know I said no more EA, but how the hell did EA turn one of the best games they ever made into this cash grab? It's almost offensive. Even Bethesda has been milking Skyrim for the last 10 years, all while releasing subpar Fallout games. And the saddest thing is, a lot of these series I mentioned used to be great, revolutionary. But now they've been taken over by corporations that just keep printing out the same garbage they know will sell because it has the name Halo or Mario on it to please shareholders more than gamers. But with indie games, this rarely happens. If an indie game is shit, nobody cares because they never had a marketing budget to begin with, so 100 people maybe wasted $5 on Steam. This allows the best indie games to rise to the top via word of mouth, and we can really appreciate the blood, sweat, and tears of a very passionate person or group of people. Obviously, No Man's Sky is a major exception to this. There was a lot of media hype around that and a lot of media pressure on the team, but in the end, they made it right. When was the last time a AAA dev did that? And even when indie games aren't great, I can usually appreciate them in one way or another. I recently did a review on a tiny indie game called Force of Nature. To be honest, it's not great. I think I gave it a 4 out of 10. It's got a lot of quirks, but I could still appreciate the game for the world that this person created. It was genuinely interesting and unique, and I had some good fun with the game. Again, it's far from perfect, and honestly, I couldn't recommend playing it for tens of hours, but if you're bored and you want to try something new, there's value in it for a couple dollars. You could try something new and appreciate someone's creative work. But when a AAA dev sells me a new game for $60 and it's borderline unplayable when I boot it up for the first time, it is so frustrating. In the comments, drop me your favorite indie game. Word of mouth on these things is how we find masterpieces, and if you like the video, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.